Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says the abolition of FC80. We have the President of India. He has recently promulgated an ordinance called as Tribunal Reforms, Rationalization and Conditions of Service Ordinance of 2021. What is the objective of this ordinance? There are n number of tribunals that are set up by the government. This particular tribunal might give a particular judgment or it might pass an order as well. If this judgment or an order is not liked, is not in favor of a particular party, this party may go to an appellate tribunal. So the appellate tribunal will once again give a particular order or a judgment. So what is the ordinance trying to do? All these appellate tribunals that have been established under a particular statutory act will be done away with, and such a responsibility will be handed to one of the judicial bodies. So this particular responsibility which was given to the appellate tribunal body will now be handed to a judicial body or to the respective high court. Confused? Let me explain this with the help of an example. We have one of the important authorities called as the Central Board of Film Certification. What is the job role of this particular authority? Let's say there is one of the films. This particular film will have to be opened up to the public viewership. So what do? They apply for a certification. They apply for the permission from the central board, which is also called as the censor board. The central board or the censor board will look into this particular movie. They will also suggest that particular movie director and that particular movie authorities to make certain changes. Why? Because this particular body sees that a particular movie will require certain changes, certain cuts. Only then the public would be able to take this particular movie, or they would be receptive to this particular movie. In case it is against the modesty of the women, in case it is against certain religious sentiments, the director of the movie would be asked to chop off certain content of the movie or remove certain scenes from this particular movie. So what does it do? It provides what is called as the CBFC certificate. Only after this certificate is given by the censor board, that is when a particular movie will be out in the public viewership. This CBFC certificate also has criteria. It also has what is called as certifications. Let's say for example, it can be unrestricted or the universal viewing, which means to say that any person would be able to watch this particular movie, or it can have a certification of A as well, where only an adult who is above 18 years of age would be able to view it. So it is the Central Board of Film Certification which would be able to provide certification for a particular movie. Now let's say there is a scenario where the CBFC has denied certification for the film. Let's say for example, this particular movie had to be open to the public viewership, but the CBFC has not given the permission for the public viewership, or they might have asked a particular film unit to chop off so many units that the film unit is not happy with this particular order or the judgment. So what do? They apply to one of the appellate bodies. This appellate bodies with respect to the Central Board of Film Certification is what is called as Film Certificate Appellate Tribunal. So this Film Certificate Appellate Tribunal was one of the statutory bodies that was established by the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting when in the year 1983, and this was established under section 5D of the Cinematography Act of 1952. So what would happen? We have the CBFC which will say that these cuts will have to be taken up by the film unit, but this particular film unit is not happy with this particular judgment. So what do? They appeal to this particular tribunal, which happens to be an adjudicative body. As a result, what they have is the next layer where they would be able to approach. In the past, there have been n number of examples where one section, that is the CBFC, might have ignored it, but we have the Film Certificate Appellate Tribunal which has given permission for a particular films where they would be in a position to release the movie for the public viewership. Such has been the existence when it comes to the appellate body and one of the bodies for a statutory act. But what is happening with respect to the present ordinance? The ordinance is doing away with this appellate tribunal in number of cases. In the present scenario, what we have is this ordinance which will be eliminating the film certificate appellate tribunal. So what we will have in the near future is only the CBFC as a body, and this tribunal will be eliminated in case the movie unit requires any changes. All that they have to do in the near future is approach the High Court in their relevant jurisdiction. So what is happening here? This extra buffering layer that was present between the High Court and the CBFC, where this was acting as a bridge, this will be completely done away with, and what we will have is only the CBFC, and in case they have issues, they should be approaching the High Court. This is one such example in the present scenario. There are about 8 other appellate authorities which will be completely disbanded with the immediate effect with the passing of this particular ordinance. Now the question is, how was the central government able to do it? We have one of the important acts, that is the Finance Act of 2017, which empowered the central government to notify rules on qualifications of members of the tribunals, terms and conditions of their service, composition of search selection committee. Using this particular law, they were able to bring changes when it comes to the appellate tribunals as well. Now, when it comes to this particular ordinance, it specifies the term of office for the chairperson of the tribunals, which will be 4 years or till the attainment of the age of 70 years, whichever is earlier, and for the other members of the tribunal, the term will be 4 years or till the age of 67 years, whichever is earlier. So because of this particular mandate given under the Finance Act of 2017, they were able to bring changes with respect to this law. Now, what is that we have to understand is, why did the central government come up with such an initiative? Why did the central government take such a decision of disbanding what is called as the appellate tribunals? Let's understand the very concept. When you go back to about 3 decades back, what we have is nothing but the establishment of the high courts, and we had a particular body. But the tribunals as a concept started emerging after, like, let's say 1990, where we had the open up of the LPG era. There were more number of cases which went to the court of law, which went to the high courts as well and to the Supreme Court as well. So what we actually resulted was increasing litigation cases, adjudicatory cases that had to be taken up by the High Court. In order to reduce the number of cases going to the court of law, that is why the government came up with new specialist tribunals. So what are these tribunals? These are the bodies which will have experts from that particular domain. Let's say, for example, we have the National Green Tribunal. National Green Tribunal will require expertise from the environmentalists. So instead of a case going to the High Court or the Supreme Court directly, what we have is this NGT or any other tribunal for that matter, which will first understand what that issue is and will pass an order accordingly. So this happened after 1990s, where more number of cases started getting into the fold of the High Court, into the fold of the Supreme Court. So to reduce all these cases and pendency of cases, what we have is the establishment of the tribunals. But what is happening of late? This is the perspective of the government. According to the government, they basically believe the quality of adjudication has been underwhelming. Why? Originally, when this particular tribunals were being established, they thought that we will have specialist bodies, people who have expertise, people who would be able to give correct orders to this particular issue. But of late, the government is witnessing is the quality of the adjudication process when it comes to the tribunal is underrepresented, does not have value, and as a result, the central buffer layer is actually increasing the number of cases, the expense to it, and ultimately it lands up in the High Court. In spite of the appellate tribunal giving the judgment, all these orders that are passed by the tribunals, it is still going to the High Court. So what is the use of this intermediate or the central level tribunal, which is appellate tribunal? So what is the government looking at? The government is looking at the central intermediate level appellate tribunal, where most cases do come, they have to judge as well, but these judgments or the orders passed by the adjudicative tribunals are still going to the High Court. Since they are still going to the High Court, what is the use of this intermediate appellate tribunal? The major focus for the government currently is with respect to the costs that have been taking place with the establishment of this appellate tribunal. Apart from this, we also have the advocate bar associations which have also gone against the tribunals as well. Why? Because when you consider the tribunals for its operations, for its working, they primarily focus on the executive department. When they focus on the executive department, when they focus on the money that comes from the executive orders, what they actually mean is that the independence of the particular judgment is completely done away with. What we have is the separation of powers. When we speak about the separation of powers, we have the legislature which makes the laws, executive which implements the laws, the judiciary which has to interpret the laws and act independently and give the judgment. Since the tribunals get their finances, get their monetary benefits from the executive, will they be independent? Will they be able to give judgment independently? That was the question that was raised by the advocate bar associations. Looking into the cost factor and the independence and the expertise which they are not able to find off late, which is why the government has come up with this particular ordinance. So this ordinance will completely do away with this intermediate level appellate tribunal, and that will be replaced by the judicial bodies, that is respectively the High Court. This is the perspective of the government. But now we have to look at the other side as well. What is the other side? Let's take the example of the Central Board of Film Certification. Then let's take the example of Film Certificate Appellate Tribunal. In the past, what has happened? Let's say, for example, there is one of the movies which is supposed to be released on one of the festivals. Why? Because the film unit basically believes in case there is a particular movie which has to be released on a particular day, they will have more sales, more profit, so on and so forth. So what do? They appeal to the what is called as the CBFC. This CBFC might not allow the certification, it might deny as well. That is when they go to the what is called as the FCAT. The FCAT looks onto the merit of it and in number of cases has given permission for the film unit to open for the public viewership. Now, if this particular body is done away with, they have to go to the High Court. If they have to go to the High Court, will they be able to pass the judgment on time? Why? According to the film fraternity, they feel that this particular idea of doing away with this particular intermediate appellate tribunal is wrong. If it goes to the court of law, they would take long number of days, and as a result, that movie will not release on time. That has been the major apprehension for dismantling this entire structure. Apart from this, when you look at the operations of FCAT, on an average, they used to resolve at least 20 cases in a specific month. But now, since it is going to the High Court, will they be able to resolve the crisis? Will they be able to solve the particular problem, which is what is being looked at in a negative tinge? As a result, this particular article goes on to say that the government, before it had taken this particular step, should have consulted the stakeholders, and without consulting the stakeholders, it has taken a wrong decision, says this article. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says another hint of new physics, this time from Fermi Lab. What is this Fermi Lab? This happens to be one of the America's particle physics and accelerator laboratory. What is the objective of setting up this laboratory? Basically, when you look into this Fermi Lab, it has a vision to solve all the mysteries of the matter, energy, space and time. So discovering the basic ideas of the matter, how it evolved, what is its contributions to the global community, that is what is the basic objective of the Fermi Lab. So the Fermi Lab has a vision to solve the mysteries of matter, energy, space and time. This laboratory had recently conducted one of the experiments. That experiment is what is called as MUON G2. Before we understand what this experiment is all about, we have to understand one of the important models of physics called as the Standard Model. What is the Standard Model? This is one of the theories. What does it do? It predicts the behavior of all the building blocks of the universe. Let's say, for example, there are some of the basic particles of the physics. Let's say particles like the quarks. What are these quarks? Let's say, for example, they include the protons as well as the neutrons. Or let's say, for example, there are other particles like the leptons. What is the example of lepton? It includes the electron. So what the Standard Model will do is to understand the properties, the activities, the influences of all these particles under the electromagnetic forces. And one of the particle that belongs to the leptons is what is called as the muon. So muon happens to be a lepton which is similar to that of the electron, but it is 200 times larger and much more unstable than the electron. So kindly remember, we are speaking about one of the subatomic particles called as lepton, and we are speaking about one of the leptons called as muon, and the experiment was conducted on the muon. So what is the Standard Model? It is one of the models which will study the behavior of the building blocks of the universe. Now what this article focuses is on one of the subatomic particle called as the muon. What is this muon? As we have discussed, this happens to be a lepton, and they are planning to discover one of the quantities of muon. That quantity is what is called as the G factor. So what is this G factor? When this particular particle is placed under the influence of the magnetic field, what would be the characteristics? How will it react? What will be its actions? How will it be stable or not? That will be decided according to this experiment. So this experiment is called as muon G2. This experiment has a particular quantity called as the G factor. So when it is placed under the influence of the magnetic field, how will this particle react? What will be its characteristics? Whether it will be stable or not is what is the actual experiment behind this muon G2 experiment. When it comes to the Standard Model, what the Standard Model basically predicts is certain numbers. For a particular action, there will be a particular output. Whenever there is an experiment that is being conducted, they would already have what is called as the static value. For a particular experiment, there would have already been experiments that have been conducted in the past, or there might have been theoretical calculations which might be conducted, which would obviously mean that there is a particular output or a particular unit that is expected from a particular experiment. According to the experiment on muon, using the principles of the Standard Model, it was expected that there would be a particular value which would be generated. The experiments were conducted, and when we looked into the output of this particular experiment, what was the original idea of the Standard Model? The output that was expected was not met under the influence of the magnetic field, which means to say there was some other particle which was trying to influence the muon under the characteristic of the magnetic field. So it means to say that the muon was not directly under the influence of magnetic field, but there was some other particle which was trying to influence the characteristics of the muon, which led to more spins when it comes to this particle, which led to more wobbling of this particular particle. So the scientists who are working on this experiment basically believe that under the influence of the magnetic field, an expected value was not met as per the static data, which means that there were certain other particles which might have influenced the characteristic of muon. So all that they conclude, and which they might also change in the near future, is that it is not only muon, but there are other particles which might have influenced the outcome of this experiment. So what they are looking at is new hint at new particles when it comes to this subatomic particle. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about great one-horned rhinoceros. Before we understand some of the important data with respect to the animal, we have to understand that there are 5 species of rhinoceros in the world. 3 species are found in Asia, 2 are found in Africa. We have the great one-horned rhino, Sumatran rhino, Javan rhino, which are found in Asia, and the black rhino and white rhino, which are found in Africa. So from the preliminary examination point of view, kindly remember it is the Sumatran rhino which happens to be the smallest of the world's 5 rhino species. So among the 5 that we have, it is the Sumatran rhino which happens to be the smallest among these 5 rhinos. Now the question for you guys is, since Sumatran rhino is the smallest among these 5 species of rhinos, which is the largest among these 5 species? So please do look into it. Put your answers on the comment section. Now let's understand some of the important factual data when it comes to the Indian rhino. Indian rhino is a rhinoceros species native to the Indian subcontinent. From the preliminary examination point of view, kindly remember it is listed as vulnerable on the IUCN Red List. Where is it seen in India? The great one-horned rhinos are found in Kaziranga, Manas, Pobitora, Orang National Park in Assam, and Jaldapara and Gorumara National Park in West Bengal. So kindly remember, when it comes to the location of these rhinos, they usually live in a particular area which is semi-aquatic in nature, which has large swamps in that particular area, and they usually reside by the river sides. Now the important part of our discussion is the threats emanating with respect to this particular species. So what are the various threats for this particular species? One is the illegal trade. The illegal trade can result in 2 parts. What are those? One is because they kill this particular animal species, and it is generally assumed that the horn of this particular species has a medicinal value. Because they believe that it has a medical value, that is why they are being killed. They are exported to countries like China, as they believe that there is a treatment for variety of ailments like epilepsy, fever and cancer. On the other side, when you look into countries like Yemen, this particular rhino horn is used for dagger handles as well. And at the same time, it has also resulted in human rhino conflict. Why? When we look into the regions of West Bengal, or let's say the region of Assam, what we are actually witnessing is increasing population. So because there is increasing population, all those areas which were the natural homes for this particular species is now completely diluted, and as a result humans are entering these areas. There is increase of the agricultural activity, there is increase of the industrial activity. So all those areas which was once the natural home for the rhinos are taken by the human beings, which is why these rhinos enter the areas of the humans, and this has been resulting in the human animal conflict. So these are the threats that have been emanating when it comes to the one-horned rhino. In order to overcome this particular issue, we have the Ministry of Environment, which has come up with the National Conservation Strategy for the Indian one-horned rhinoceros. So what are they looking at? They want to basically make sure that the population of the rhinoceros increases over a period of time, for which they have come up with the National Conservation Strategy, and they have also started speaking to the local communities. They started engaging the local communities so that the conflict with the animals is comparatively reduced. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about one of the rivers called as Umankot. Kindly remember, from the preliminary examination point of view, this particular river is in the state of Meghalaya. So kindly remember, the river Umankot is in the state of Meghalaya. What is the unique feature of this particular river? This particular river is considered India's clearest river. Since it is India's clearest river, what do we actually see? That there is increasing cases where people visit this particular place. So there is a lot of tourism opportunities in this region, and it has also become the tourism hub. So people generate a lot of profit because of the incoming of the tourists. And at the same time, this particular river is also known for the fishing activity, where it is a livelihood source and mechanism for number of fishing community. So what is the major problem right now? When you look into this article, we have the government which is planning to come up, and it has proposed a project of coming up with 210 megawatt hydroelectric project. If this particular proposal is accepted, if this particular proposal is implemented, what we will have is disastrous consequences, says this article. Why? That is because as of now, we know for the fact that this is one of the important areas and it is helping the tourism sector as well. If there is the construction of the hydroelectric project, what we will actually see is irreplaceable losses for the locals in this particular area, and it might hit the tourism sector in this area. Apart from this, the project documents say that there are about 13 villages along this particular river, that they would lose around 296 hectares of land due to the submergence of the dam that comes in this particular place. Added to the ooze of it, as we discussed, the fishing is one of the important livelihood mechanisms. The other livelihood mechanisms in and around this particular project, and people will face the major brunt if this project does come into implementation. These are the major concerns when it comes to this particular project. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about one of the important cities in Yemen called as Marib. So kindly remember, Marib happens to be one of the important cities where in the country of Yemen. Also remember, this particular place is in the region of Yemen and it is close by to the capital Sana'a. What is the major issue right now? We have discussed in the past about the Yemen crisis. We have spoken about Saudi Arabia. We have spoken about the influence of Iran, and the link for the same will also be given in our description box. Now in the present scenario, we have the Houthis. This happens to be one of the extremist organizations. This organization is backed by Iran, and now this particular organization is close by to capturing Marib. This happens to be one of the important cities. Previously, the capital Sana'a has been under the control of the Houthis, and now if they capture this particular city, which is known for its petroleum production, which is known for its oil, what we will have is the Houthi community or this extremist organization which will have control over the capital region Sana'a and one of the important cities called as Marib, which means to say when this comes under the control of the Houthis, the influence of Saudi Arabia in the region of Yemen may start moving away. They might not have control in their neighborhood, and as a result, Iran's influence in Yemen might increase, creating more instability and fights between Saudi Arabia and the Houthis, says this article. So kindly remember, we have discussed about the Yemen crisis in the past, so we would be giving you the link. Kindly follow the link as well. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Since it's a Sunday, we want you guys to write two important essays within 1000 to 1200 words. What is the topic? Modernism and our traditional social ethical values. Second essay topic, relationship between human health and environmental conservation. So please write all the essays on the comment section, peer review, give positive feedback to your friends' answers. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.